Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. We're happy to see you. Thank you for joining us for another video today. As I've said, my name is Genghis Shakhan. I'm the managing attorney here at Shakhan and Wilkerson Law Firm. Today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about domestic relations financial affidavits. You'll see these documents used a lot in domestic relations cases, whether it be divorce, child custody. You'll also see them in legitimation cases. You will see them in child support cases, sometimes in contempt cases. It just depends. So it's a pretty important document. And so we'll go over today some of the most important elements of that document. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about what you can expect from this video. We'll do a quick roadmap. So essentially, as I mentioned, we'll talk a bit about domestic relations financial affidavits. I'll define what they are. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about their purpose, namely things like we talked about divorce, alimony or spousal support, attorney's fees, child support, temporary support. So if you find yourself in a situation where you may not be getting a divorce, but you guys might be doing separate maintenance, again, that might call for a DRFA, and that is the acronym Domestic Relations Financial Affidavit. You may also hear the acronym thrown around by attorneys and legal professionals, DRFA, and by the court as well. And so also when it comes to equitable division of the estate, going through a divorce, again, it's going to be super popular and super important to have that DRFA also. And that's also going to be able to speak to the ability to pay debts. Okay. And so debt is a big part of the equitable division of a marital estate, as well as the assets. A lot of folks focus a lot on the assets. So that is what this video will discuss. Before we get there, though, I do want to inform you, just a quick disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only. By watching this video, that does not establish an attorney-client relationship between you and the law firm of Shakhan and Wilkerson, nor does it establish a relationship between yourself, an attorney-client relationship, that is, between yourself and me, Genghis Shakhan, acting as managing attorney. Okay. So that being said, we got that out the way. Why don't we go ahead and do a deep dive into domestic relations financial affidavits, why they're significant, why they're important, and let's start with what it actually is. Okay. And so essentially, judges and courts rely pretty heavily on these domestic relations financial affidavits, especially if, again, this is a domestic relations case. It's not something that you're going to see in criminal law. It's something that more, for the most part, is going to be part of the civil law arena, and is going to focus more specifically on domestic relations matters. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about what can happen if you have a poorly drafted DRFA. Okay, and so sometimes we do see it a lot in pro se cases, but it might not just be a pro se case. Sometimes people will do it strategically. They will, just basically have a very ambiguous document full of very vague language or confusing language that essentially is used to throw another attorney, the opposing attorney, off the scent of some pretty big assets. And so we'll talk a bit about that as well. Okay, but a poorly drafted affidavit can ultimately it can hurt your credibility, especially if it looks like you're engaging in subterfuge and engaging in deception. You're trying to confuse the court. You're trying to confuse the opposing party. So it can hurt your credibility. And then of course it can impact your child support, right? So if those numbers are inaccurate, and again, we're talking about a case where children might be involved in a divorce, legitimation, or something like a modification, or some kind of a contempt action. You might see those child support numbers go up or go down based on what was inside of that DRFA. It can lead to unfair spousal support awards or alimony awards if it's not accurate. Also, it might put you on the hook for attorney's fees. Okay, that's something else you might want to think about. And it is often used, and it's something that at our office we use to impeach someone. Okay, so if you come on your DRFA, domestic relations financial affidavit, and you say that you are unemployed, however, I pull your taxes or I pull your W 2s, and I see that you are not only gainfully employed, but you are doing very well. I am going to use it. Attorney Wilkerson is going to use it to impeach you, right, and to impeach your testimony, and it's going to hurt your credibility in front of a court or in front of a jury. Okay, so that's something that you want to think about, right? Is you don't want to perjure yourself, okay, because perjury is a thing. So you're signing this document and you're signing it under penalty of perjury. All right. So, want to keep that in mind, right? So it's just not a document that you are drafting willy nilly. You're signing it at the back end of it, and you're having it notarized. Okay. So that's pretty important. Means that it's something that you can commit acts of perjury, and the court has ways of dealing with that. So let's talk about some of the documents that you should think about gathering first before getting started with your domestic relations financial affidavit. Things like pay stubs and W-2s, tax returns are pretty common sense documents, bank statements, credit card statements, stuff that you might have regarding installment loans, mortgage statements, vehicle loan information, retirement accounts are big, investment accounts, utility bills, insurance statements, things like child care receipts, medical receipts, student loan payments, all of those things can be put into that domestic relations financial affidavit. In fact, we encourage you to do so because it's going to be super helpful. As I said, when the court is really parsing through all of this information, trying to figure out what maybe child support should look like, what a spousal or alimony might look like on a spousal support might look like on a monthly basis, or what attorney's fees might look like if there are these big disparities in incomes. Okay, so this is the document that a lot of times judges are taking the peek see at to make that determination. So it's important that you don't you don't guess when it comes to completing these documents. Okay, you want to make sure that it was completing the DRFA. You want to make sure that you have your documents on hand and that you are actually entering correct information. So you want to complete the income section. So that's one of the major sections of the domestic relations financial affidavit, and they're asking usually about employment income. Okay, so gross income, net income, those are sometimes questions that are asked. Salary, hourly wages, overtime, bonuses, and then sometimes if there are commissions, those things will be completed by you. If you are self-employed, it's going to ask about your business income, ordinary business expenses, and you want to avoid overstating deductions. Okay, so again, that's for our self-employed folks. We do represent not just the parties that are self-employed, but we represent spouses of parties who are self-employed, and so those are the things that we are looking for. Oftentimes, sometimes those self-employed folks do come to us, and we're on the lookout for hidden assets because it's just so easy to hide assets when you are self-employed as opposed to when you are employed maybe in the private sector. Okay. All right. So other income, because that is a possibility as well. There can be rental income, income coming from investments, pensions, social security, the disability, military retirements, okay, as well as VA benefits. All right, so you always want to make sure that you're disclosing all sources of income, or if you're on the opposing side, you're looking for other sources of income that might not have been disclosed. Again, we talked about hidden assets because that's all going to be a part if we're talking about a divorce of the equitable division of the estate. Okay, or it might be a part if we're talking about child support, might be a part of that combined adjusted gross income of the parents. All right, so something to be very very mindful of. Now this is another biggie here is going to be monthly expenses. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are completing this portion of the DRFA because this is going to let the court know essentially what your net income is, right? If we can see what is going out the door in terms of expenses. And so, housing, that's going to include things like your mortgage or your rent, the utilities, electric, water, if you're paying sewer, internet, cell phone, those type of things. And then you have things like transportation, right? So your vehicle payment, your fuel, repairs, any type of maintenance, that's going to be factored in along with things like food and medical and insurance and entertainment and childcare. All of those things are going to be factored in there as well in terms of your expenses. So it's pretty important that you do want to come up with some kind of monthly averages, and that's going to really, really help the court in making in their determinations regarding, like I said, child support or division of the estate. All right. So another area of the DRFA is going to be assets. Okay, assets are discussed, and you want to explain. Here are some things that you do want to disclose in terms of assets. Things like real estate, if you have classic cars or vehicles, bank accounts, retirement accounts, stocks, cryptocurrency, business interests, cash, collectibles, jewelry, all this stuff is going to be super helpful. Firearms, boats, ATVs, investment accounts, right? And so another thing you don't want to forget are if there are going to be future bonuses that are out there, or if there's stock options or restricted stock, deferred compensation, even things like airline miles. Okay, those things are, especially when you start talking about a divorce, those things are going to be part and parcel of that marital estate and assets that belong to the marital estate. Now, the other part of this is going to be discussing debt, right? And so this is one thing that is commonly overlooked. But if you are in debt, and most of us are as Americans, at least you're carrying some form of debt, unless you are, you follow Dave Ramsey and you're looking to be debt free. Mortgage, credit card payments, car loans, student loans, personal loans, IRS debt, medical debt, business loans, family loans. Okay, so all of these things are debt that families, individuals carry, that are going to be completed in that domestic relations financial affidavit. Okay, you want to talk about what your monthly payment is. That's essentially what is being sought in the DRFA. Okay, now let's talk about some common mistakes that we see people make when it comes to completing the domestic relations financial affidavit. And that is usually going to be just guessing, right? Doing, the guesswork. Instead of reviewing their records, someone is just going to say, oh, you know what? I feel like I'm paying, $200 a month for my electric bill. I feel like, I'm paying 500 bucks a month for food. All right. So you do want to try to use real numbers, make sure that it is based on real data, and that's going to again help not just the court, it's going to help you out ultimately as well. Okay, you don't want to forget about cash income also, things like tips, side jobs, cash businesses, or any kind of gig work. I'm talking about gig work, things like Uber, things like Upwork, any kind of DoorDash, Instacart, those type of gig work is what we're referencing. You want to be aware of underreporting. That happens quite a bit. Underreporting expenses or inflating expenses. You'll see both of them. Okay. And again, sometimes people are doing it to really affect those child support obligation numbers, or they're doing it, to really throw off the maybe the spousal support numbers or alimony numbers, and so people will inflate or deflate those numbers as a result. All right. You also don't want to forget about those annual expenses, because you may have monthly expenses, but there are annual expenses that sometimes people forget to put in here. Things like property taxes, HOA dues, insurance premiums, vehicle registration, as well as school assets, right? School tuition, excuse me. And so these are annual kind of fees that can belong in that debt section, but they may not be monthly. And what you can do is you can break those down by what they look like by dividing them over a 12-month period. And then you got to be careful of hiding assets, or the opposing side hiding assets. And I talked about that briefly already. So what we can do is subpoena records. to get access to bank records, tax returns, retirement accounts, payroll records, business records, if necessary, right? If we feel like that DRFA is not complete, or if it looks like that it's not done accurately, we may follow up and circle back by really going ahead and pursuing those records on our own, as opposed to waiting for the opposing side to tender and get that stuff over to us. Okay, so omitting debts is a thing. It does happen. It happens fairly regularly. You also don't want to forget about joint accounts, okay, because we see those get forgotten quite often. Okay, now, the best way for us to verify the relations affidavit is usually just through discovery. Okay, so we do discovery. We opt in every case, and so we're looking at maybe filing some subpoenas, depositions when needed, getting those tax returns, payroll records, credit reports, business records, etc. Right. So it's important for us to get an accurate picture for our clients. That's essential. Okay. We want to make sure our clients are protected and that they're not overpaying, either it's in child support or spousal support, or they are not being underpaid if they are on the receiving end. Okay. Now, there is a duty to update these affidavits. I want you to keep that in mind, because financial circumstances can change, especially in these very, very uncertain times that we're in currently. So you have a duty to essentially report, if there have been changes in your financial situation. Either that might happen because you've gotten a new job, you've lost a job, you've gotten promoted, you've been laid off, maybe you've gotten received a bonus. Maybe there's some new debt, some huge medical expense now that you have to take care of. Maybe you're retiring, and so that all of those things can potentially impact, whether or not your DRFA and those numbers are going to change. All right. So when you're completing a DRFA, it's just important to take your time with this stuff, right? It is labor intense. I don't want to mislead you. And it can take some time, but I think it's a good exercise, good practice, really to find out what your financial health looks like. Sometimes people don't really look at the numbers. So it's a good way to really get your finger on the pulse of what's happening in your financial life. But you want it to be accurate. You do want to keep your documentation. You do want to, kind of, you don't want to minimize things. You want to be truthful and transparent. You want to review those numbers, okay? And then, of course, you want to remember that essentially your testimony needs to absolutely 1,000% match your DRFA, okay? What's in that domestic relations financial affidavit, right? If those two things don't match, then there's absolutely going to be a problem, all right? Now, if you're kind of getting started along this journey, you've already began completing a DRFA. Maybe you have received a request. Either maybe you've been served already and you've received a request for discovery. They're looking for interrogatories and other documents from you. You might need an attorney. You might need an attorney if you are a high income earner. If you are a business owner, maybe facilitate and own rental properties, retirement accounts, stock options, alimony. You suspect there might be some hidden assets. There's a child support dispute. Maybe there's a contempt action that's pending. Maybe there's modification, and you just have a very complex case. Or sometimes in divorces, if there are children, if there are assets, major assets to be divided, I like to call those complex cases. Okay. And if you're in any of those situations or scenarios, it's a good idea to maybe bring on counsel to really help you out and, hammer some stuff out for you, because, this is really important aspect of any domestic relations case are these numbers. Okay. All right. So, in wrapping up, again, domestic relations financial affidavit, you might hear it called DRFA, 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 and that is the acronym. Understand that it's not just paperwork. This is important stuff. Courts use these and rely pretty heavily on these documents. Your counsel will, the attorneys absolutely do. They are used to help determine what your child support obligation is going to look like, what spousal support might look like, what attorney's fees might look like. And they can be used, as I mentioned, to impeach a witness. Okay, so it's very, very important that you make sure that you are being transparent, that you are completing the documents in their entirety, and that you are giving your counsel a clearer picture of what's happening with you financially. Okay, so that being said, if this video has been helpful, please take some time to smash that like button. If you know someone that's going through a domestic relations case, whether it's a friend or a family member, feel free to pass this video along to them. Also, take a look and visit our other videos. If you need to get in contact with us, hit the link in our bio. You can visit us. We have offices in both Macon, Savannah, so both all three of Macon, Savannah, um, Augusta, as well as Atlanta. You can give us a call at 404 999 9529, or you can give us a call at 478 845 1213, or you can go to the link in our bio, hit that link in the bio, and you will see a place to actually sign up and get registered, okay, for a consultation. We'd be more than happy to chat with you in a consultation if you are looking to go forward with retaining an attorney, and we'd be honored to represent you. All right, guys, thank you for joining us for this video. Make sure that you catch us all up and down YouTube for our long form content videos. We discuss everything criminal as well as family law and divorce as well as child custody. All right, it's been a blessing.